Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Tuesday. The sun is shining over here in UK. I hope you're having a very good start to your week wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. And why shouldn't you be? Because Arsenal have their new signing, their first new signing, major new signing of the summer. Riccardo Calafiori is now on board. Confirmation finally coming through late yesterday afternoon, as expected, that he had completed his move to Arsenal. We saw social media clips put out by Arsenal of him meeting his new teammates in the team meeting over in the United States, taking part in his first training session, albeit on his own, yesterday over in Philadelphia ahead of the game against Liverpool a little bit later on in this week. So plenty to discuss today. We'll have a look at what Calafiori's been saying about his move. We'll look at what Mikel Arteta is saying about finally getting hold of the Italian, plus what might be to come when it comes to the transfer window. We'll look at Emile Smith Rowe after a deal has now been agreed between Arsenal and Fulham over his move to West London. Got plenty of other bits and pieces to catch up on as well in today's show. But of course, we've got to start on the news of Riccardo Calafiori. If you're watching on YouTube, there he is signing that contract with Mikel Arteta, both looking so happy, both with the most immaculate hair you're ever going to see. And someone like me in my position, just a little bit jealous looking at pictures like that. But yeah, what a excellent picture. After waiting so long to have this confirmation, finally has come through, and there he is, all smiles with the manager. Of course, he's spoken about his reasons for joining. He spoke to Arsenal.com. He also spoke to the Arsenal press pack who had travelled over to the United States. So Kai Kainak put the full transcript of what he had to say to the journalist out. I retweeted that yesterday. If you want to go and find it on my social media, you can read the full transcript of what he had to say. Speaking of Arsenal, he said, I spoke a lot with the coach and with Edu, and they convinced me, but I was already convinced by myself. I think this is the best project for me over the next few years, and I think I will improve as a player. I've just met Jorginho 1 month ago, but I can see he's a really good guy. I was already convinced, but he forced me. He said, come. You will enjoy being here. The team is amazing. The staff, everything is good. And you can see that already just from the first few minutes here. He said, look, I came to play. I will do everything to play and give something to the team. I hope I can do that from the first few games. From my point of view, it's just the start, the beginning of something bigger. I'm excited to play for Arsenal and to win trophies. Bit of a vow there, to win trophies. And that's what you would expect to hear from him. And it's a fantastic signing. It's a really exciting signing. We all got to see firsthand during the Euros just what an exciting prospect he's been. You speak to anyone who watched him over in Bologna last season, they will all tell you the same about how exciting he is, you know, what the attributes he has, how strong he is, how comfortable he is on the ball, how he loves to get forward and drive into the central sort of midfield areas. I mean, he's perfect for Mikel Arteta and this Arsenal team when you look at it. And looking at what Mikel Arteta had to say, he said, I'm very happy. It took a while. It was a player that we have monitored for a year. We were really short in the back line last year in terms of numbers, and we demanded so much more from them. William Saliba, for example, played in every minute of the Premier League, and we believe we had to be more protected. We identified him as a talent that can give us skill and qualities that are going to make us better. We are signing a player with a huge capacity to develop. And I mean, again, you know, classic Arsenal. He's only 22, Riccardo Calafiori. So as good as he is, and as much as what he's shown over the last year, both for Bologna and for Italy, you know, he's still very young, and he's still, you know, got huge rooms for improvement. And that's a really exciting thing about signing a player of this caliber with this amount of potential. You think coming into this coaching group who can get much more out of these players, and we've seen that time and time again over the last couple of years. You know, you look at Calafiori and what he could become, and that is really exciting. Mikel was asked, you know, what's his best position? Is it left back or centre back? And he said both positions, especially the way we want to play and the way we want to evolve in our game models. He's a player who's going to fit in to what we want. And again, you know, before this all sort of emerged in the Calafiori stuff, and I really began to take it seriously, I didn't know too much about him. You know, I hadn't sat there and religiously watched Bologna last season, so I didn't know too much about him at all. But you know, once I found out that Arsenal were interested and were pushing to get this deal done, I've been speaking to lots of people who do know a lot about him. And again, the overriding thing that keeps being said to me is he is perfect for Mikel Arteta in terms of what he is as a defender, whether that's at left back, whether that's at centre back. He has the attributes that just seem absolutely tailor-made for Mikel and the system that Arsenal play. And that's a really exciting prospect, I would say. Number 33 as well. I think the last number 33 was Petr Cech. So hopefully he's a little bit more successful for Arsenal than Petr was. He did take part in his first training session yesterday, Riccardo Calafiori. As I said, though, it wasn't with the group. It was away from the group, kind of doing it on his own. There you can see some of the pictures again if you're watching on YouTube in the Philadelphia Union Stadium. Took part with some of the coaching staff sort of working on things. His first training session. He's basically flown over, done his medical in London, flown over, met the squad, and then went through his paces. But we could see him with the first team today for the first time. Of course, the game against Liverpool is coming up now on Thursday, early hours of Thursday morning. Mikel was asked if Calafiori could play in that game. He said, I don't know. He had a long flight yesterday. He had his medical over the past 24 hours. Today, he hasn't really done anything with the team, and tomorrow he will probably train some parts. Let's see how he is. We don't want to rush anything. If he's available and fit, great. I would suggest we're probably going to see him. I reckon we'll see him for like 10 or 15 minutes in the second half, just to give the fans over there a bit of a treat to see their new signing before Arsenal head back to the UK. I mean, that is barring there's anything, any sort of injury worry or anything like that the medical staff have picked up, which, I can't imagine there is. So if he's fit and the medical staff believe he can last 15, 20 minutes, then I'm sure he'll get on, just to give everyone a little bit of a treat who is at the stadium on Saturday. And like Mikel said, we're probably going to get to see him in action with the first team squad today. It was interesting in some of the other parts he's been speaking about. He said he came to the game against Crystal Palace in January, which shows, again, I know a lot of people said, Arsenal are only interested in him on the back of the Euros performances for Italy. And I was told that was rubbish. And, the fact he's travelled over, he's come and watched the game. I can't imagine he's done that just for the sake of it. He's not been sitting in Bologna and thought, what shall I do this weekend? I'm going to head over, watch Arsenal play against Crystal Palace in January. There was obviously things going on in the background there, and he was invited over to have a little bit of a watch of the game. So I think that says it all in terms of how long Arsenal have been targeting Calafiori for. Now, this is what Mikel's been saying again about what could be next in the transfer window. He says, we'll have to wait and see what movements are in the market. We've already identified things that we can improve. We have meetings every March or April. And if we can, we will try and strengthen the team. I believe we can get better. But so far, I am really happy with what we have. Now, I've said it before, I expect Arsenal now to really sort of focus on bolstering their midfield options with at least one new arrival. I do think an attacker will probably come in as well. Obviously, the Emile Smith Rowe transfer is going through at the moment, which we'll talk about. Once that's done, then there's clearly going to be need for at least one new addition in midfield. And I do think that'll probably be the area that Arsenal do look to target. We know they're interested in Mikel Merino at Real Sociedad. There's other players they've been looking at as well, of course. As far as I'm aware, Merino is probably at the top of the queue at the moment, but that's not saying that they're definitely going to go out and sign him. But that is the area that I think they're going to focus on after that. And just quickly going back a little bit to the Calafiori stuff, Mikel was asked about the need for another defender. He touched on it in the last quote I said about when he mentioned Saliba. He goes into it a little bit more detail here, which I think is pretty interesting in terms of what we might see next season, certainly in the defence, but throughout the squad. He says, look, it was the numbers. We only had 6 defenders in the back line. And at this level, you have to be really lucky to sustain the season like this. And we were, because William, for example, and Gabriel played nearly every minute. We played more than 50% more minutes than the previous season. If we're able to do that consistently over the next 3 or 4 years, that is a big question mark. Obviously, you can't just bet on that. That's a big bet, and we didn't want to take that bet. So, Mikel acknowledging that last season, a lot of the key players played too many minutes, and then Arsenal were fortunate that some of them didn't pick up injuries. You look at the defence with the amount of games Saliba and Gabriel played, for example. Odegaard, Saka, players like that as well, going a little bit further forward. I think, and he's mentioned this a few times now, I think it's becoming pretty evident, but by the signings that Arsenal are trying to make this window, including, of course, Calafiori, is to ensure that rotation is going to be a lot more easy to do for Mikel Arteta next season. It was pretty clear there was some of those players on the bench last year he didn't really trust. They were there, they were on the bench, but he didn't really, when push comes to shove, he didn't really want to use them. He didn't trust them to be able to maintain the level that Arsenal needed to stay in the title hunt. And that's why he didn't really do it so much. And when you look at the addition of Calafiori and you look at what Arsenal have in defence now and the unbelievable options they have across that backline, the only way he's going to keep them happy is by rotating. Certainly a lot more than what we saw last season. I thought those were quite interesting comments from Mikel. Okay, Emile Smith Rowe. Now, deal has been agreed with Fulham. I say this fighting back the tears, of course, that Emile is now very, very close to leaving the club. £34 million is the deal. It's 27 million up front and another 7 million dependent on performances and clauses that could be here. If all of that gets taken up, then it's going to be a joint record transfer fee for Arsenal in terms of fee received. For Fulham, it smashes their transfer record in terms of player purchased. For Smith Rowe, I think it's a really, really good move. I just think it's a good move for all parties. I think for Arsenal, it's a good deal. For a player who's barely played for 2 years, who hasn't scored a goal for 2 years, who clocked up just a handful of minutes last season, £34 million is a good price for where he was. Go back a couple of years when he was playing and scoring all of those goals, and you'd probably say 34 million, no chance. But given what's happened in the last 2 years, I think it would have been difficult for Arsenal to get more than that for him. So I think it's a good deal for them. I think it's a good deal for Fulham, providing he stays fit and he kicks on. I think he could prove to be, an excellent purchase at 34 million. And for Smith Rowe, I think it's a really good move as well. So he's now going to fly back from the US. He's going to complete his medical, and then it looks like, providing that all goes to plan, then he'll fly over and join up with Fulham in Portugal for their pre-season tour. It's going to look really, really weird. I've already seen mocked up pictures of him in a Fulham kit, and it just looks totally odd for me. But I've said it before, I just hope he goes there and smashes it. I really, really do. I just want him to go there, stay fit, show everyone what he can do, because he's been too good to what's happened the last couple of years sitting on the bench. He needs to go out and play and do the business. And I really, really hope he does do the business when he goes to Fulham, apart from when he plays against Arsenal, of course. The rest of the squad went in without Smith Rowe, without Calafiori as well, went through an open training session. Calafiori was there, of course, but didn't join in with the rest of the squad. They had an open training session in Philly yesterday ahead of the game against Liverpool in the early hours of Thursday morning, the final game of Arsenal's pre-season tour. Pretty much everyone was there yesterday. Mikel confirming as well that Saka, Declan Rice, Raya, Ramsdale. He didn't mention Saliba, but I presume Saliba is the same case. Basically, the 4 players he mentioned are all 4 who were in the Euros final, but I imagine Saliba's similar as well. He confirmed that they're all going to come back to training this weekend, not in the States, obviously, but back in London. So they'll be starting training this weekend, which is good news. Everyone's going to be together again. He was asked, are you confident that your whole squad, including those players, of course, are going to be available for the opening game of the season? And he said yes, which is another good thing as well. Obviously, those players are going to come back, are a little bit further behind than everyone else, but they've got a couple of games to work up to it. It's not like they've been out of football for ages. It was only 3 weeks ago they were training every week with their national teams and playing in the Euros final. So they're all going to be relatively at a decent level. I've already seen Saka on social media showing that the fitness work he's been doing while he's been away. So they're going to be there. I'd be stunned, provided none of them get any injuries or anything like that. I'd be very, very surprised if they all don't feature in that opening game against Wolves, which is very, very close. Now, I am going away on holiday by the way, on Friday. So there's not going to be anywhere near as many, if any. I don't know yet. I need to come up with a little bit of an agreement with my wife while we're away, if I'm going to be able to do any videos or any shows while I'm away. It might be that you got 2 weeks without me starting on Friday. So be prepared for that. If I'm not doing any videos, that is why. But I am back the day before the Wolves game. So I will be there for the first game of the season. So yeah, just a little bit of a disclaimer. If you don't see any shows from me coming up for the next couple of weeks from Friday onwards, that's why. It's because of family holiday time before the start of the new season. Before we move on to some of your questions and comments, just there, if you're seeing it on YouTube, you can see the message that Chido Obi-Martin has put out. I can barely even read it. It's so small on the screen there. But he did put out a message on his social media saying, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to everyone at Arsenal for the past 4 years. The experience and growth I've achieved here have been truly invaluable. A special thanks to the coaches, staff and teammates at Hale End. The memories made will always be remembered. Thank you once again for this journey. I wish everyone continued success and all the best for the future. Best regards, Chido Obi. So him saying his goodbyes to Arsenal ahead of his next move, whether that be to Manchester United, Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure it won't be too long before he announces it, but he has now announced his departure officially from Arsenal. Right, on to some of what you guys have been saying. Lots of reaction, of course, to the Calafiori news. Here's some of them. Tony at the top there says, don't you think that a 3 at the back with Calafiori, Gabriel and Saliba, with wing-backs of Timber and White, offers Arsenal the most potent attacking option as well as strength at the back? I don't know. I don't really see Arsenal as a 3 at the back team, not with the way that Arteta plays and the way he wants his fullbacks sort of dropping in and being an extra man in midfield. I think they're definitely going to be a 4 at the back, and then one of them inverts and goes further forward, and then you will have kind of 3, which I presume will be Calafiori, as you say, Gabriel and Saliba, but you'll have White as a sort of more traditional, well, not traditional, but traditional in an Arsenal sense, playing the inverted role a little bit, but we'll see, because Calafiori is equally as good as doing that, as he's shown for Italy and for Bologna, of course. What is our starting backline, says Sam. I like the Calafiori signing, but now I don't understand Timber's role. again, sort of going back to what Mikel's been saying that we were talking about earlier on in the show, he is now going to have to balance these minutes between these players, and that's the aim because he wants it. He said last season, look, we were lucky, we got away with it. Barely anyone got injured in terms of the two centre backs. We needed to protect ourselves, and I think now, potentially for the first real time, depending on who comes in midfield and attack as well, this might be the season that we really don't see an absolute guaranteed starting 11 for Arsenal because the strength in depth is going to be there. And you look at the options in the defence. I agree with you, Sam. I look at it now, and I don't really know what the back line is going to be right now because Calafiori's come in. You imagine he's going to play. He spoke in his interviews yesterday saying, look, I've come to play. So he'll be expecting to play. You'd imagine that'll be left back. And then Saliba and Gabriel, you look at it, best centre-back partnership in the league last season. Surely that's not going to be broken up. And then you look at Ben White and what he's done. You think, well, Ben's surely going to play. So it's like, well, where is Timber? Where does Timber play in this? And Timber's been so good in pre-season. He's been playing at centre-back. We know he can play at left-back. Naturally, he's right-sided. We've not even seen him play there, really, for Arsenal yet, properly. So, there's loads of questions. That's before you even throw Tomiyasu, Zinchenko, Kivior into the mix at the moment. Arsenal got so many options at the back, and that's what Mikel wants. He wants to be able to have those options, and he wants to be able to rotate and ensure that when he does, he is very, very confident that the level in the team stays the same. Goss says, I think you should give more consideration to Calafiori competing for a place with Gabriel rather than Timber. Not immediately, but I suspect sometime in the season that will be the case. Being so accomplished on the ball as Calafiori is with Saliba, Timber and White will be technically gifted backline to play through the press. Gabriel was the least comfortable in that regard last season. Arteta looks for incremental improvements. And in my opinion, Calafiori will improve the side in this regard. If he proves his defensive capabilities in the EPL, then Gabriel will be the one looking over his shoulder. Could well be the case. Again, when you look at what Mikel was saying yesterday, why he brought Calafiori in, he kept mentioning the centre-backs, didn't he, rather than a left-back. Now, my understanding, he has come in to be more of a left-sided defender at the moment. But, we know he plays in that centre-back role. We know he's very, very confident there. We know Arsenal had the whole issue with Gabriel at the start of last season when it looked for a time like he might well be moving on. Maybe that is the case. Again, we're just going to have to see how it all develops over the course of the season, but it's going to be really, really interesting to keep an eye on. Jonathan here says, hello from Louisville, USA. Big fan, Charles. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I understand putting some blame on Martinelli's form last year on the lack of consistency on the left-hand side. However, Trossard managed 12 goals in the Premier League, typically from that position. So some responsibility has to go to Gabby. Yeah, of course it does. 100%. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, Trossard didn't have the issues that Gabby did. But I also think last season, and the thing with Trossard as well, he wasn't really used to that left-sided partnership that Gabriel was. Trossard came late, halfway through that second half of the season, and then he was playing more as a bit part player because Martinelli had that position nailed down. Martinelli was so used to Zinchenko and Xhaka. I don't think it was anywhere near as big of a change for Trossard last season because he just didn't have that sort of partnership that Martinelli had forged with Xhaka and Zinchenko before he arrived. But also Trossard was just razor sharp in the final third last season. And that was the thing that was lacking from Martinelli. I don't think his performances were poor by any means. I just think in the final third, that's where he let himself down last season. His finishing wasn't great. His final ball wasn't great. His decision-making wasn't great. And that's what cost him a little bit last season. But I do expect him to be back to his best this season. I really, really do. Right, here's one from Peter now. Says, hi, Charles. Arteta is risk-averse when it comes to developing our bright young talent. Unai Emery and Freddie Ljungberg introduced Martinelli, Saka and Smith Rowe to the first team. So far, we have seen little regarding the development of our academy players under Arteta. And maybe this was a consideration when Obi-Martin decided to leave. Wanyeri has been superb on the US tour, and I'm very interested to see what Arteta's plans are for him. Will he trust the player and take a leaf out of Ten Hag's development at Kobe Minu and play him? He's ready for the first team and ready-made solution for the number 8 position. See, I don't agree with that at all. I really don't. When you say, well, Arteta is risk-averse when it comes to developing our bright young talent, the players you have listed there, Martinelli, Saka and Smith Rowe, Arteta's developed them. He's the one who's turned them into these genuine world-class players now. Well, certainly I say world-class, top-level players now. Yes, he gave them their debuts, but he was the one who has transformed them to where they were 4 years ago when he walked into the club to what they are now. You can't give Ljungberg or Emery credit for that. You give them credit for putting them into the first team picture. They made a handful of games, some of them, when Arteta arrived, but they weren't what they are now. He has developed them. He took them on at that age. He played them at that age and turned them into what they are now as from teenagers. So he deserves so much credit for that, even if it wasn't the one who actually gave them the debut. He was the one who took the risk almost to play them so much at that age and developing them into what they are now. So I don't really agree with that, I have to say, Peter. And also, I think when you look at what Ranieri's showing now on the preseason tour, that again, the under-21s coach obviously has to take credit for it, but I also think he's been training week in, week out with Arsenal under Arteta, Ranieri, for a while now. Arteta gave him his debut at 15. So where Ranieri is now from where he was 2 years ago, Arteta's played a huge part in that development to make him look as comfortable as he is now in the first team setup. So, what happens between now over the next season in terms of Ranieri and possibly Miles, we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think Arteta's going to look at them and think, I'm not going to play you because you're young. I think if he thinks they're good enough, he will play them. I'm absolutely sure of that. And I've always thought that with Arteta. Okay, I think one more to go now. And it's from Lloyd. He says, hi, Charles. Do you think if we have Jesus fit and Arteta has confidence in him, do you see him and Kai competing for the striker's role? Or do you see Jesus up front and Havertz being back in midfield with Rice back in Partey's role? I still think Havertz, I'm still expecting Havertz to start against Wolves as the central striker. Maybe depending on what happens in the next 3 games, Jesus can make it impossible for Mikel to drop him for that opening game against Wolves. If he stars against Liverpool, if he comes back to the 2 games in the Emirates and is brilliant in those, then and makes himself impossible, then Jesus will get the nod. But I still think if that's the case, it wouldn't surprise me if Havertz is on the bench and he's not playing in that number 8 role. But, Mikel did play him when he came on in that number 8 role against Manchester United. So I don't think that's the end of it. I don't think, a lot of people think, oh, we don't think he played well there last season. Arteta's ripped up that experiment and it's gone. I don't think it is. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see him playing there in bits and pieces this season. I don't think he would be like a starter there in every single game. I think Arteta still sees him now more as a central striking option than he does as a left 8 option. But, Havertz can certainly play there 100%. He may not have been as effective there as he was as a striker, but he can certainly play there. So I think basically it's down to what the 2 of them do in these next few games in pre-season, Lloyd, in terms of who starts that game against Wolves. Right, and that's it from me, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. As always, I really do appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow to do it all over again, focusing on that game against Liverpool, try and do my predicted 11, that sort of stuff. And anything you want me to say, anything you sort of want to see potentially done in the game against Liverpool, give me your thoughts in the comments below. I'll pull some of them together and get them included in tomorrow's preview show. Until then, have a fantastic day, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.